Welcome to the Nat and Sarah Show, where we aim to touch, move, and inspire you every single week. Really? We're really going to introduce our own show? Maybe we should leave it to the pro.
Oh my gosh. Okay. 1 second, ladies. Here we go. Sarah Maxwell and Natalie Cook are experts in visualization and deliberate use of the law of attraction. As dynamic world athletes representing Canada and Australia in beach volleyball, they honed in on achievement at the highest level. Winning an Olympic gold medal on her home beach of Bondi is a pinnacle example. Their powerful techniques transmute the spiritual to the tangible, allowing thousands of their community members to bring their vision boards to life. Recently, they've taken their expertise on the road as the full-time family, where they inspire, coach, and lead people to create their unique, deliberate family life using a simplified 3-step process. Welcome to the Nat and Sarah Show. Join us for twice-weekly episodes. Each week, Nat and Sarah will teach us how to deliberately create results in all areas of life using their unique 3-step process. Not only that, they'll also sit down with some of their favorite high achievers who have manifested what most merely dream about. Are you a member of the community? Go to bit.ly/The Nat and Sarah Show to download your 3-step journal to follow along with each workshop-style teaching episode and get ready to take action on your inspirations.
Hey dreamers! Today we continue the conversation with a serial entrepreneur, Chris Saad. Aren't you glad I didn't just end the word with serial? Because then that would be scary. But hailing from Brisbane, Australia, this former head of product at Uber developer platform is one creative guy. He builds strategies, products, messages, brands, ecosystems, standards, and startups. A magician when it comes to developer platforms. He has that added ability to inspire and teach young-preneurs how to take their own ideas and bring them to market. A mentor at Founders for Founders, a community of startup founders, he recognizes the power of coming together and sharing the journey. A teacher at the core, he has lived the Silicon Valley life and now wants to share what he's learned with the next generation back in Australia. I admire his desire to pass on knowledge in a way that makes a real difference. So thanks, Chris, for taking some time to share with our community of dreamers how they can take their ideas and start risking them into the light. Showing them how to work the head, torso, and tail, as you like to say, of a development so that it be a complete and success in the long run. So if you're cool, Chris, should we jump in?
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks for the very kind introduction.
I know you did all that. That young, like you guys can't see him, but he looks like he's 15 and somehow he lived the Silicon Valley life in the past. And that's what I want to start with. Like, how does a Brisbane boy land in Silicon Valley?
Wow. That is a very big question because it's a series of incremental little course corrections and, aha moments that lead you there, right? If I'll maybe do a bit of a hop, skip, and a jump through the story.
Perfect.
I've guess inspired by my parents. I became very curious about technology, about computers, about the future, and entrepreneurship actually as well, by watching them run businesses. They had, one of the first point of sale systems that was computerized. They showed me Star Trek, and they taught me that really anything I wanted to do was possible. And I had the naivete to believe them, I guess. And so, watching their example and then getting very passionate about computers and software and programming, I started to realize that the best examples of people who are successful at doing that were based in either Redmond, just outside of Seattle, which is where Microsoft is and now Amazon, or we're in Silicon Valley, where every other company you've ever heard of is pretty much based, Facebook and Twitter and Google and so on. And so over time, I eventually started to model my business and my thinking around how they do business and how they launch products and how they brand products and how they design products. And then eventually started to understand that I actually really needed to be there. And along that way, along that journey was just really countless mentors and advisors who gave me nudges in the right direction, until one of my mentors finally said, no, you need to be in Silicon Valley now. Actually, two of them in particular, a guy called Marty and a guy called Nick. And they were like, you need to be in Silicon Valley now. You're just wasting time and wasting your talent. So, Nick basically grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and said, I don't care how you fund it, put it on your credit card, but I'll come with you. Let's go. And so we spent a month there. And within a couple of days, I had felt it like I'd come home. I'd met people and saw things that felt immediately familiar in a way that really I hadn't felt at home. And
so can I ask a question about that? So what do you is the difference from looking from afar? So you're doing some research about what goes on in these places, these meccas. What was the difference between watching, studying from afar, and actually being immersed?
Yeah, it's like night and day. And this actually happened to me again recently when I was watching China from afar, and then I went there just for a few weeks, and the same thing hit me in the face, which is it's one thing to understand something intellectually and academically. It is dramatically different to understand it viscerally and emotionally and practically. And so it's just completely different. And that's why oftentimes the first piece of advice I give to any wannabe, tech startup entrepreneur is go spend the better part of a month there if you can, at least. A lot of people will go there for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I'll say, do the, as I sometimes call it, the Chris Saad tour, like go for the month and really try to live and breathe it. It's just different. It's different. And a lot of what you will learn is not from people giving you explicit advice, but rather through osmosis, through drinking the water and sitting at a cafe and hearing everybody around you talking about tech. And yeah, you'll just learn a completely different style of thinking at a different pace.
Was your work with Uber in Silicon Valley or back in Australia?
No, it was in Silicon Valley. Well, technically it was in San Francisco, which is technically not part of the Valley, but it's part of the Bay Area and Silicon Valley. Yeah. So in the city there is where their headquarters is.
And getting to work, what was that environment like working at Uber?
Well, Uber was everything. It was a roller coaster ride. I think it was my dream job. To head up a developer platform for a top 5-ish, tech company, was literally something I had dreamed of doing. I didn't think I was really in a position to get that kind of role, and was very excited to get it. Initially, there was a lot of autonomy and a lot of agency to imagine and build whatever I wanted. And that ebbed and that's what I was promised initially, and I was equally excited about. And that ebbed and flowed as kind of people and personalities and politics came in and out of the picture, and then we scaled things up. So that was an incredible journey. New kinds of hustle and new kinds of operational excellence. That for example, I had thought I was really hustling and working to a certain standard when I was running my own businesses and my own startups.
Yeah.
But when you work with some of those AAA players running at Uber speed, it literally recalibrates your brain about what is possible, about the kind of quality of work you need to do, and how fast you need to move. And then eventually it became quite a emotional roller coaster with some of the news media and some of the controversy that came out of it. And I learned probably just as much about that. From that as anything else. And some of that was accurate, but really most of it was quite a fascinating disconnect with reality.
So basically, I'm sure that's a good topic for a second, just to touch on, because, we often talk about, we herald successes and when everything's going well, but how do you handle it when, it's not exactly this is a bit dramatic, but it's like people are turning against what you're creating. How did you deal with that?
Well, I think for most people there, including myself, I had really drunk the Kool-Aid, right? I was, and to a large extent, still convinced that Uber is a net positive for the world. And the people there are working with basically good intentions to realize that vision and make a positive impact on the world. And so, given that level of conviction and focus, most of us just kept our head down and kept working. The challenge, of course, is when you're a year in, and every good intention or best intention is reinterpreted and remixed as some sort of nefarious thing, and every step or misstep that happened in the past is drudged up and recontextualized and put to dark music and black and white images. It just starts to get wearing for sure. But for the most part, we just kind of kept focused and kept executing.
And now I'm supposed to talk about a whole bunch of other things, but I have to just ask this: why do you think that society is so afraid of shared? What do you call Uber and Airbnb, and like, do you call this the shared economy? What do you call this kind of idea that we trust each other around business? Like, what do you call that?
Well, it's had a number of different names: the collaborative economy, the sharing economy, the on-demand economy. I like on-demand the most, because what I've found is it actually doesn't matter how the demand is fulfilled, whether it's from shared resources from others, or whether it's contractors, or whether it's full-time employees. The key mechanic, the key insight, the key thing that's disruptive is that customers get it now, right now, with the press of a button. It's extremely customer-centric and customer-obsessed. And so I think really the on-demand economy is the right name for it.
And why are people scared of that? I'm not. I freaking love it. But why are other people?
I think there are many reasons why they're scared of it. I mean, in the case of Uber specifically, I think the legitimate complaint by, let's say, the taxi industry was, well, we have all of these artificial constraints on us, like regulation and the medallion system and so on. And why do they get to skirt that, those regulations? And I think that was a fair criticism. But at the end of the day, it's difficult to switch from their model to Uber's model, where they have $100,000 fit outs and, heavy branding and livery and, manual dispatch and a lack of a promise to the customer in terms of when they'll show up and why. And they just didn't understand or have the capital, sadly, to compete. And I don't think it was realistic that they would. But, the controversy I'm referring to is less about that and more some of the, the controversy around the CEO and some of the other, aggressive tactics of the internally, which, is a whole rabbit hole of a discussion. But
I was going to say, maybe I don't even know about that hole. So don't even, we won't go there on this one. But basically, you just said something that was really interesting, because sometimes innovation or something new exposes the old, meaning it highlights things that society didn't even know was going on, like you said, in the taxi industry, like these constraints that were imposed, and I think that's the discomfort, actually, because these constraints have been in place for a long time, and it's going to make somebody uncomfortable to start to have them exposed.
I mean, the broad category of what this is, and the euphemism Silicon Valley uses, is disruption, right? And really what disruption is a nice turn of phrase of saying destruction of the old and the reinvention into the new. And so the old, the taxi industry or whatever is going to feel a great deal of pain. In many cases, workers and general society is going to feel a great deal of pain. Because disruption is tough and change is hard, and most people don't like it. And, in my belief, really, it's kind of private enterprises' job to disrupt, and it's public enterprises, government's job to smooth out the changes, to help with the transitions. And so, disruption is really scary, but it's by definition looking at old problems with fresh eyes, using fresh tools, and going back to first principles. And a lot of the latest disruption has come down to the fact that you have a supercomputer in your pocket, you have internet connectivity in the air, and you have people who are, and all of the old rules of don't get into cars with strangers and, don't let other people into your home, all of those have been thrown out because we can kind of disintermediate trust and put it into the network. So, this allows us to rethink everything about society and the way we do business.
And, thank you to this new way technology that allows a Brisbane person like you to speak to a Switzerland person like me and put it on iTunes for everybody else. So I'm going to selfishly take something you just said and position what we're doing with this podcast is we want people to disrupt their own lives in creating their new life story, meaning, you know, killing off the old story that's been potentially living them in order to create the story that they want to live into the future. Because I feel that sometimes even just identifying, exposing that it's there is really powerful. You know, you gain this awareness that, hey, this is a pattern that it's just been going on. And perhaps I have more, I'm more powerful than I think in scripting my story. And so that's what I didn't even think about that until you were talking. I was like, oh my God, that's what we're doing here. So thank you for, I don't necessarily want to use the word disruption because everybody else does, but perhaps that's what we're doing.
Yeah. And you know, narratives are a huge part of the way the human brain perceives and exists in the world, right? I think it's a way that we pattern match and we simplify the reality we're in to a very, you know, it's a way that we digest it and place ourselves in it. And narratives are absolutely essential to the way that we think and act in the world. But your narrative can either serve you and uplift you and empower you, or it can disempower you and limit you. And literally the only thing you need to do to have a higher kind of conception of yourself is to rewrite the narrative in your head about yourself. You know, I want to caveat all of that with, you know, there are obviously people who have very real constraints on their lives, right? You know, maybe they're unfortunately stuck in poverty, or they have disabilities, but for the most part, even just changing your perspective on the things that you're experiencing and the way you react to the things happening to you and at you is a very powerful tool, and one that I'm constantly trying to question my own narratives about myself and try to figure out the next highest vision and version of that narrative.
Wow, really cool. You know, when you said how powerful this supercomputer is that we have in our pocket, referring to the smartphone, I assume.
Yes.
You know, we have this even more powerful supercomputer in our head. And it's either an ally or it's operating an old system, like it's on an old operating system. And so, you know, that's the thing that most interested me in university. I guess that's why that's what I've been studying my whole life, this other supercomputer. But I can see that I could go in that direction, but I want to pull it back just a little bit because I'm sitting here with a startup expert who will hate that title, but I'm going to give it to you. A startup expert. So can you just give a little distinction between like small business, entrepreneur, startup? Because I know sometimes all these words get molded into one. Are they the same thing? Yeah.
And in my experience, particularly in Australia, those things are often used interchangeably, and they're not. A small business is typically something that is oriented around a relatively small ambition, and relatively local ambition, and relatively slow growth, slow organic growth, meaning I'm going to buy widgets for $1 and I'm going to sell them for $2, and I'm going to do that in my local neighborhood. I'm going to set up a retail store. I'm going to set up some kind of business, and start to trade and try to make revenue and things like that. A startup is a wholly different beast. The goal of a startup is not necessarily to make revenue initially, and it's not even the traditional business principles. Its goal is to massively disrupt a category of something and to grow geometrically, not linearly. So not this year you make $5 and next year you make $10 and the year after that you make $20. The goal is to, well, actually even there I'm doubling. So if you were doubling, that's okay. The doubling is okay. if you were to just make $5 extra each year, you're in trouble. That's linear growth. But if you're doubling every year, that's geometric growth, right? That's what we call a hockey stick. And that's your job as a startup. And also your job is to grow inorganically. So it's not to make revenue and then spend it within your means. It's to raise capital and burn it beyond your means so that you can grow faster than any of the other competitors in the space, take all of the oxygen out of the room before they know what's happening, and deliver a materially better service, which typically using technology and optimized processes and first principles and kind of customer-centric thinking, which all of that together will produce a kind of disruption that a small business is not designed to do. And actually, I'll just add to that. Typically, unlike a small business, which is typically owned by one person or maybe a partnership with someone, or maybe the bank gives you a loan, a startup is, if you think of it like a pie, your goal is not to own 100% of the pie. Your goal is to, or the way you go about doing what I just described earlier, is to give away pieces of that pie, such that each time you give a piece of that pie to somebody, that person adds so much value that the pie itself grows. And so your overall percentage ownership will shrink, but the value of the remaining slice that you own is bigger than it would have been if you were just doing it by yourself and owning 100% of the pie.
Awesome visual. Honestly, like really clear. And like my mind's begging, what kind of mindset do you have as a founder to steal such oxygen in order to disrupt the world? Why would you do that?
You have to have an abundance mindset. It's literally, it all comes down to an abundance mindset. The worst thing you can do is to be constrained by the accidents of birth. So like the geography that you were born in is kind of like, people typically just work in that environment. The things that are immediately placed in front of them, they just kind of work on those problems. The constraints they're given by the government or their family or their boss, they typically accept those constraints and work within them. These are all either kind of I don't want to use too pejorative language, but they're easy things to do. The opposite thing, or the startup mindset, is one of abundance and one of possibilities. It's like, well, I don't have to accept any of these things. I can actually start from first principles and think about the problem from an entirely blank piece of paper, and do the most effective thing instead of just operate within the space I've been given.
So like if you're listening to someone's idea that wants to change the world, disrupt things, how do you identify, or how do you listen for a great idea versus an insane idea? Or maybe they're the same. Are they the same thing for a while?
Well, a cliche or an axiom in the startup world is ideas. I don't know if I can swear on your podcast. But,
you can.
Okay. Ideas are like assholes. Everyone's got one.
Very good.
Right. And so, maybe a more PC way of saying that is, ideas are worthless. And so what you'll often encounter is people saying, well, I have an idea and I want you to sign my non-disclosure agreement before I tell you what it is. And, it's the best idea since sliced bread, and idea. Actually, as I've touched on, everybody's got ideas. What the real question is, what are the 1,000 other ideas and decisions that you're going to execute to make this idea a reality? And
boom. Did everybody hear that? That's the distinction right there. Awesome.
Right. So when a founder would approach me as an investor or as a potential advisor, and a founder approaches any investor, they're not listening for the quality of the idea. Well, they are obviously curious about the idea, and that plays a part, but they're much more curious about the thought process that got them to that decision about the idea. And also they're much more curious about, well, what have you done so far to prove some of your hypotheses correct? And what have you done to actually materialize that idea into reality insofar as you're able to do that within your means? And then what have you done to pull out all the stops and take away all the excuses and actually made something real? So it's not enough to say I have an idea. Where's your pitch deck where you've clearly thought through the details of that idea? It's not enough to have a pitch deck. Where are your mock-ups and wireframes about how the interface would work? It's not enough to have an interface or a mock-up. where's the prototype that you got made by some guy or girl on Elance with, by spending some credit card dollars on that. And it's not enough to have that. It's like, well, have you gone and actually put this in front of users and got some users to actually start using it, and have you proved that people care about it and will stick around and keep using it, and so on and so forth. And so depending on what stage you're at as an investor, as an advisor, I'd want to see some of those very concrete steps along the journey of making your idea a reality.
Also, because I was going to ask you if there's a framework for mapping it out, if you're the person with the idea, but I think you just gave some key elements. Like basically what I'm getting is the mindset is abundance, possibility, and you have to have a go for it mentality. Like you have to be able to risk it all at every moment. Meaning, you said credit card dollars. Did everybody hear that? That means I'm going for this. Like this is not like you said, comfortable behavior. This sounds like people that are willing to live in the unknown zone, that discomfort zone. So now, do you think people are born that way, or can you, what's the word, cultivate that?
Well, it's often talked about like there's risk sensitivity and risk tolerance that people have, and maybe that you're born with it. Maybe it's Maybelline. maybe it's, was
that a North American joke? Oh, it is Aussie. Okay. I'm like, I got that.
That's an old Australian joke. It's a hair salon thing. No, but maybe you're born with it. Maybe it's something you learn. I don't know. But what I know for me is I don't think it's actually about risk tolerance for me. I think it's about reframing risk. So I think if you do not try, you are 100% guaranteed to fail. And if you do not attempt to live a larger life with a more ambitious outcome, then you are guaranteed to live a mediocre life. And so my sense of it is like, it's not actually about being more risk tolerant. It's actually recognizing the risk that's already in my life and the virtually guaranteed outcomes if I don't try. And then on the flip side, you're just as likely to lose your job or be susceptible to your whole category of skill set being made redundant by robots and AI. And like, so all of these comfort zones that we think are so safe are just illusionary, right? They're just fake. And so, nothing more scary to me in terms of risk than wasting my potential and my life living someone else's dream. There's that saying, you're either working on your own dreams or someone else's. And I'd rather be working on mine.
Did your parents teach you that did you always know what you're saying now, that ability to reframe the risk? Because a lot of people are living in a whole other frame around risk.
I'm sure they did. And I think they did as much through their actions as they did through their words. They were entrepreneurs in their own right. Now they were running small businesses. They had little video stores, and later they started a cafe. So I guess growing up, my template was you can just run your own thing. They had normal full-time jobs in the middle there of my life, but my early life and later life, they were running their own businesses. So, and again, I referenced Star Trek earlier, like through silly things like that, through the movies and shows they showed me, they kind of demonstrated that, you can just reframe the world and make different decisions.
I mean, I would love a study to ask people who do amazing things in the world, whether Star Trek was in their early years, because I know for Nat, it was such a critical teacher in her life. Same thing, that reality is malleable and that you can actually shift shape and all these ideas. It's incredible what a first teacher it was in her life as well. So I'd love to know that. That'd be kind of cool. What a study.
I'd love to know that too. I mean, it might sound ridiculous to those who think they've seen it and discount and hated it, or have heard a lot about it but think it's nerdy. But like, I can't overstate its impact on my life. And that may seem completely crazy, but the principles are in that show, and there's the parables of each episode, which basically is a series of parables, were I think instrumental in the way I think. But and as were my mentors and my friends, and I learned as much from watching bad examples as good examples. I found everything that I saw that I felt was suboptimal, or I saw people ending up in bad situations or making bad decisions or making small decisions. All of those added up in my mind as thinking like, I don't want to do that. So how did they end up there? Okay, let's not do that. And so I kind of also learned a lot from the bad examples as well.
So do you ever get afraid as you move forward and you know, like uncover new ground?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I definitely, I have, I think, a healthy sense of paranoia that you have to, right? I mean, this is not about being Pollyannic or ignoring risk. It's just about recognizing that you can manage it, and that it's, you know, in Silicon Valley, failure is an option. Failure is celebrated almost. This is another mindset difference. I think we talked about abundance and possibility thinking. The other is to putting aside the meaning that you ascribe to failure. There's a famous saying, I think it was, I don't know, Einstein or something, is like, the only reason I ever succeeded is because I failed 100 times more than I succeeded. I mean, this is not a nicety or a platitude. I some of my career I describe as failing up. I mean, I literally, I have failed so much, and I wrote a blog post about all of the things I've learned from my failures. It's just, you have to reframe failure as it's not something to be afraid of. It's actually part of the process. It's an integral part of the process.
Yeah.
The companies and people who fail fastest and most are the ones who quickly achieve, who figure out the right path before everybody else. And so I guess to answer your question directly, I'm not so afraid of, I definitely experience fear. It's not necessarily around failure. It's for me, I have, and Nat knows this actually. I have I have social anxiety. So I'm coming up. You know, through a series of sequence of, I guess, self-reinforcing things. I have a lot of fear around public speaking and things like that. That's where most of my fear comes from. Got it.
Okay, so you do have that challenge and something that you're working with to overcome it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's an omnipresent thing in my life, and I've had to come up with lots of different hacks and techniques to have it not hold me back.
Brilliant. Love that. And I want to leave it on that because of what you just mentioned about failure, because it's a theme. It's something that's been coming up, and I can see that there is a reframe around this idea of failure that successful people know, and that people who are waiting to be successful may misinterpret, meaning thank you for clarifying that. And I just want to thank you for being the kind of person that's willing to share your experience and knowledge. And I can just feel, and Nat definitely knows that you're on a mission to make a difference in the world. So we feel really privileged that you were open to collaborating with us. So thank you so much.
Oh, no worries. Thank you for the invitation. This has been tons of fun.
You're so welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. Don't forget to join the community at bit.ly/The Nat and Sarah Show to download your 3-step journal and participate in weekly lives found only in our private group.
Hold on. You've got to rate and review the show. And I know all the podcasts are always asking this, and in the past, I wasn't doing it. And the reason I wasn't doing it is because I actually didn't know how to do it. So, open your podcast player and click on our show from your library, not the Listen Now. That's where I was going wrong in the past. So now that you know how to do it,
when you go there, make sure you give us a 5-star review. 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. And then click on write a review link to actually write a review so that you can tell other people that we're legit and even funny, maybe a bit serious.
So if you want to recommend this to someone, you have to put your fingers on the keys and send us a review.
Thanks!